Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Liz and we're talking about, for want of a better term, what happens after this life. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast, and thank you very much for your patience as we went through the little glitches as they happened. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, and I've actually so excuse me, I've been looking forward to this for a while because I reached out to you in August, and I'm fascinated by your website and kind of the topic we're going to get onto, and how you discovered it. And thankfully you've got your books in the background so everybody can see. They start with what the fuck, however pronounced WTF, for those who are concerned about book covers. So where would you start with the story? Like how it happened?
How it happened. So, Unfortunately, in 2015, my dad passed away, and it's really hard. I'm an only child. I was very young at the time. We were really close. And I'm raised culturally Jewish. My dad's Jewish, my mom's Protestant. Atheist, though, very secular culture. Like holidays, Hanukkah was about 8 presents and candles,
Yeah.
Easter was about the Easter bunny. So something like an afterlife just seemed like complete fantasy. And that was kind of where it started. I just had a thought. And, I don't know if I'm a pretty logical person. It's going to sound a little nuts, but I thought, when you're kind of in that griefy brain, and we just had gotten word they were moving my dad to hospice, and I just felt desperate until my very next thought was, okay, so most of science fiction tends to come true. I mean, look at us here on Zoom,
Yeah.
self-driving cars. So if that's the case, what about time travel? Will that come true? And someone in like 5,000 years, like my ancestors in the future, will get my dad when medicine's a whole other level. Wasn't logical, just one of those floaty thoughts. And then I thought, well, how do we know we're not time traveling? If we are, we would likely have no idea, depending how our consciousness aligns with it. And so I Googled that, and I found out time travel is possible. It's not easily doable. And you can't just go drag someone from like 3,000 years ago into the future, but time travel is possible in the sense of, Einstein's theories of time relativity. And, if we were to build a spaceship that could travel close to the speed of light, time would move very differently. Someone here on Earth, like 20 years would pass, while the person in the spaceship, only 5 years would pass for them. So that really opened my mind to, there's something else going on. I mean, because the way we perceive time, it's one way, totally unchangeable. And then it had me thinking how much of what's going on is just a perception, which led to the next thought that changed everything. I thought at the time, consciousness was created by a brain. When you die, that's it. So I thought, well, if all of our brain neurons, create a consciousness once, that's me, why in the future could another set of brain neurons not create another me? Kind of like multiple lives, like reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be Liz again. My dad wouldn't be him. But even if it took 100 trillion years after another big bang and another iteration of evolution of a conscious species, and, you know, probably if you believe in heaven or something, that doesn't sound so great because you won't see each other again. But if your whole life you only thought this one time and then permanent obliteration, that seems like a pretty good deal. So I Googled that. And that was the life changer, because I found doctors Jim Tucker and the late Dr. Ian Stevenson, child psychiatrists, professors of psychiatry, and researchers at the University of Virginia studying cases of kids with past life memories using like data driven research. And they were getting just absolutely mind blowing positive results. And that was just a game changer, because I was like, okay, it's not like in 100 trillion years of it was like a couple hundred years later, and people would have memories. And, sometimes it would only be a short period of time afterwards they'd reincarnate, and they would trace everyone back to their family of origin. And not every case was that strong, but really you only need one, and that shows consciousness and survival of consciousness and all of that is completely different than we think. And yeah, once I also found Dr. Jim Tucker, I found that kind of the algorithm takes you to all the logical researchers and the whole division he is part of called the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. And that was just all the life changer.
Yeah, I've done that with hypnosis. I'm a hypnotherapist sort of part-time, and I did some past life regression with people. And I've only done it with a few people, and only one was what I would consider like hugely successful, in the sense that they were able to go back to like the 1820s, I think it was, or something, in London, and they were able to tell me the street that they were on, and that was still exists. And the thing that was really interesting is they named like a big tall ship, like a clipper sailboat, which is kind of like how they used to sail the seas with like a big cargo ship with sails and stuff. And she was able to name it and describe it, and we looked it up, and it was exactly the name was correct, and it was exactly as she described. And and just a few details that she said at the time, and it was just like, okay, we were actually able to verify all of that. And so I've always kind of found that area to be incredibly interesting, as in what is beyond what is beyond ourselves, what is external to ourselves. And there's lots of reasons. If you look at any culture, trace it back, there's always some form of belief in afterlife, whatever that might be, that we come from somewhere and we go somewhere afterwards. And it's, whilst unproven to some degree, i.e. like scientists can't agree on what happens or where we go, there are elements that people just acknowledge as some form of consciousness. And I've always wondered, there is a point where what is the point where a human fetus becomes life, as in like conscious life? Like, what is that spark? Because at a certain point it's just cells, and then at some point, right, and this is with any animal, it's at some point there is a consciousness. And
it's, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you?
No, carry on.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because Dr. Jim Tucker talks about that. I mean, again, we want other opinions too, such as neuroscientists. But, what he mentions is there are a few people who reported memories, and they were verified that they would choose their parents. They would find people trying to get pregnant and choose them, and they could kind of go in and out a bit as the fetus developed. And kind of, I'm not sure exactly when that spark changes or when they choose to go back, but and if the first pregnancy doesn't work out, such as miscarriage, which is really sad, abortion, which is a choice and a healthy choice for people at times, they often will come back and later when the family's pregnant again. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I do. I've read some books over the years about children that have had past life experiences, and the detail in which that they could give, and they're at an age where they, 4 or 5 years old, and they're describing entire family trees. And and there's no possible explanation for that. And I remember it was around about 2000. I can never remember the gentleman's name, but it's pre-internet, and I'd been invited. I mean, the internet existed, but not in the sense that I had it in my own house or anything like that. It was like 2000. And I'd been invited to go and see a medium with an aunt of mine, who sadly is no longer with us. And you literally just turned up, bought a ticket, and you just sat in this room. And he's the only one that I've ever been convinced by. And
wow.
And the reason being is, when he was talking, He didn't ask anybody if they understood what he was saying. He would talk to you directly and say, I'm talking to you. And when people say, I don't understand the message, he was very clear. He said, I don't care. I'm telling you what I'm doing. But when he pointed to me and he was talking to me. He was able to tell me, he was talking to my grandmother. He described her accurately, where she was from and what her name was. And there's just, there is no way he could have known that because she died in 86.
Wow.
And
I've had reading. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, this is a bit different. And then he did this thing at the end, and it's called like a trance medium or something. And it's just he gets into a meditative state, and these faces keep changing on his face. And I could see somebody next to him. And I've never seen anything before. And I did tell him that I could see this face next to him. And he just said, thank you, that means something to me. And didn't tell me anything. He just thought, yeah, okay, I accept that. And it had a really profound meaning to him. And I think that's the reason that I am to this day so convinced by him. Because he never explained himself. He's just like, I don't give a monkey's whether you believe me or don't believe me. And when I said to him, like, I could see this person and this face, and it described it to him, he said, yeah, I understand that, thank you. And that was it. It's just, yep, that I know what that means. And I was just like, okay. And
that's wow. I mean, I've never had an experience like that. I've had a lot of remarkable medium readings, and I've gone to groups, where they just have known, just as you described. I've never seen someone by someone like that. And were they solid? Were they kind of see through? What did they even look like?
The person I described is probably a slight misdirection. In theatres you get that mask face, the two masks. It was one of them, and it was to his left, and it was just sat like literally just slightly off his shoulder for the whole time. And I could see it clearer than I could see you, but I'm the only person in the room that saw it. But I know, do you know what I mean? I know what I saw, and people will sort of like argue and say, no, look, I'm a qualified hypnotherapist. My full-time job is in head injuries and mental health. So I'm well aware of the capabilities of the brain, and I'm not crazy. At least not in that capacity. I know what I saw, and it wasn't a fleeting glance. It wasn't like there was no transparency to it. It may as well have been a solid object, and it had, it had eye. It smiled. It was hovering to the left of his shoulder, his left, and I know what I saw, and he knew exactly what I was talking about, but he wouldn't get into any conversation about it, and I've never seen anyone do anything as accurately as him since. And I've been to a few, and he's by far, if there's a standard, that's the standard. And I've never met anyone that's done that standard since, and I can't remember his name.
Do you remember? Oh, no. I was about to ask you his name.
Yeah. I don't remember his name, and my aunt passed away, so I can't find out who he is.
Right.
But he was sort of in his sort of 70s then, so and I've seen, I've been to a few mediums. I've had friends who are mediums and stuff, and sometimes there's inexplainable things. Like there are times when you meet somebody, and it's just, if you've been lucky enough when you meet somebody sometimes, and you are at ease with them like you've known them your entire lives. And I know that sounds cliche, but if it happens to you, you will know exactly what people are describing, because you're just like, and I'm not talking about girlfriends, boyfriends, it could be a mate. I've got a dog called Molly, and she is a rescue dog. I got her in 2020. Sadly, her owner died. From the day that we met each other, we've been inseparable. Do you know what I mean? We just clicked. She's like Velcro. And she was I don't know, 8 or 9 years old when I got her. So she was a rescue from the previous owner. And I cannot explain this connection that me and the dog have. And, she knows when I'm turning up. She knows, do you know what I mean? There's just things that she just seems to grasp. And you just like, okay. And I've had dogs all my life. I've never had a connection with a dog like I've had with this one. And I can't explain that. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not happy that I can't explain these things, but because I can't, I am happy that there is something to it beyond that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, that's really the question, how the mechanism of all this works. I've gone to many mediums, some terrible, some clearly fake, and some absolutely blew me away. And I use a fake identity. I hide everything. And I've also gotten stuff from mediums where I'm not hiding things, like friends of mine. And then what's really amazing is they'll know things that, kind of are next level, because they're not going to go through, oh, I know you lost your dad. Like, they already know that. And then they'll suddenly say something that just is so random, so specific, that I haven't really talked about or posted about. So it's just something they wouldn't know. And it's really amazing. And, my dad had a specific hobby, for example, and no mediums were getting it. None were getting it. And then a good friend and I, who's a medium, we were doing these meditations, and, he knows I'm doing the research, so he was helping me. And I was in the meditation having a, conversation, quote unquote, with my dad. And I told him, I was like, go tell Joe what the sign is. And I'd been really sad he wasn't telling it for like quite a few years, maybe 4 years. And it seems like there was a whole reason, because it built up where we came out of the meditation and Joe was like, okay, Liz, I don't think this is actually it, but your dad showed me what I don't tell anyone what it is. No, that's part of my research, but I call it tennis in my book. He's like, I don't think it's tennis, because Joe knew I was sad about not getting a sign, and I'd given a little bit of sort of lies about what it might be about, so he couldn't ever figure it out. So he was like, oh, this couldn't actually be it. And I was like crying. I'm like, that is it. And what's so crazy is the next day, or maybe the next day, Joe and his boyfriend were in a store, and he saw something related to what I call tennis. And he was like, okay, Liz's dad, if that was really you, have Liz text me in the next 5 minutes. Sets his timer. I'm standing by the subway thinking how amazing that was that Joe got the sign. And what's so weird is I started overthinking how I should text him and tell him how that was amazing. And I don't overthink texting my friend Joe. His name's Joe Peretta, by the way. He's a wonderful medium. So shout out to Joe Peretta. But I'm there in my mind, like arguing with myself. Should I text Joe? And it's not something I would ever overthink. And so I text him, and he was like, oh my God, and told me. And it's funny because it was almost like the way I would overthink it. My dad would like text Joe, and I was like, why would I text Joe now? Liz, trust me, just go text Joe, So that was fascinating.
Because I love that. And like you say, I'm the same as you. I can be quite guarded about things I've said or seen. So there's a dream I talk about, but I never mentioned the person's name because it was somebody who died. And I had this, and I know what a lucid dream is, and I know what a normal dream is, and it wasn't those. I know where I was, and I know what happened. But in this dream, I was walking down the high street, and I'd been having troubles in my life, and this person appeared in kind of like in the high street, and I was just like, and I looked at him, and I was just like, I said his name, and he was like, hi, and I was like, and I even like I remember it as clearly as I'm talking to you now, and I said, you realise you're dead, don't you? And he was just like, yeah, I know. And there was a thing, an energy or something behind him across the street, and it was, and he just said to me, he just said, look, you've got nothing to worry about. And I was just like, well, what's that over there? And he's just like, we're not really supposed to be doing this. He said, we're not supposed to really do this. He said, but I just need to let you know. He said, everything's going to be all right. You're going to be okay. And at that time, I was in a lot of trouble in my life. I just got into trouble with the law. My court case was over. I was filing for bankruptcy and all of these stuff. And like I said, it's... Yeah, I again, everyone will just say it's a lucid dream. It says, no, I know the difference. I know the difference. And there's things in that dream or meeting, whatever you want to, however people want to describe it, that I cannot explain, but there were specific details, which I'll never talk about, because exactly that, once it's out there, people can just use it. And it's the way I safeguard that experience, that if you can't tell me that, then you're not talking about the same thing. And the only time I ever have ever been more open about it is when somebody says something about their own experience, and they're like, okay, no, I understand what that was, and this is, you know, and you can then have a kind of conversation with them. And like you said, it's like that thing that you have with your dad. That's why it's important that it's just your thing, because it's the line that, you know, when somebody says it, oh, okay, that happened.
Yeah. Then it's so evidential, because if you're telling people, you can never eliminate that they just didn't find out. You know what I mean? And that they didn't Google it or overhear it. I mean, as time's gone on, a few more people have gotten what that sign is. So it's not as evidential as it was, you know, in the beginning, but nevertheless.
But context always applies, though, doesn't it? Context always applies, because if somebody doesn't know you, there used to be a medium, I'm sure he's still out there, someone Edwards, I've forgotten his first name.
John Edwards.
And and he used to be on TV sort of 20 odd years ago, at least in the UK. I'm sure he's still about and operating. And I remember him I read his autobiography, and I remember him talking about when he was kind of learning the whole mediumship thing and kind of gathering his experience and confidence and growing in his kind of strength. He was talking about meeting a lady. He met this lady, and he was trying to give her a message. And he said he kept seeing this, I think it was a bell or something. And he was just like, is that the Liberty Bell? Is it? And he was trying to explain what he thought it was. And this woman's like, no, I can't get it. So eventually he kind of in frustration, he just said, it's this. This is what I'm seeing. So you must, you know. And she was just like, no, I understand that. That's a Christmas decoration my late husband bought me. But he'd kind of tried
amazing.
he tried to interpret what the sign was, instead of just telling her the sign he was seeing. And he was explaining that was a massive leap in his mediumship, to just tell people what I see, not interpret what I see.
Yeah, you know, I've had that experience with mediums too. And I remember, like, the first medium I went to, she was amazing. And unfortunately, she's not working anymore. And just fascinating, very like hole in the wall. I randomly found her name through somebody. It's kind of amazing. She ended up being the first one, because a friend of mine knows her that I found out later, again, Joe Peretta. And he said, she's just evidence. Doesn't need to add any of the love or spirituality, just evidence. And that aligns with me, especially for my first one. And it was the same thing. She was like, what happened like January 20th? So I keep getting January 20th as significant. And I'm like, nothing. And she's like, he's not letting it go. And I thought that was interesting, because I was like, she could do something to make it fit or say something. But she's like, no, he's not letting it go. And then, you know, my mom had come with me, but in the other room. She doesn't believe any of this. She thought it was nuts. But it was shortly after my loss, and I was having a lot of panic attacks. I had to take a train kind of maybe like an hour and a half. And she said she'd go with me, but just wouldn't participate. But we called her in, because my dad was being so insistent about it. My mom's like, I don't know. And the medium then was like, he just keeps showing me 120, January 20th, 120, 120. My mom was like, oh my God, no, 120, our building number. And my dad would always call our building 120. And when he was in the hospital, he kept saying, I want to go home to 120. And then as he was getting sicker, he said, oh, I was at 120 this morning, you know, so I guess he was going out of body there. And he'd always call it that. And then she was so on point with his personality too, because she said once we got it, he laughed. It was like, it took you long enough. I'm like, that's really his personality.
It is. And it's difficult to explain to people because that would have no meaning to somebody else, so they won't understand why it's significant to you and your mum. And
Right.
and like you say, when mediums hold fast and say, no, this is what they're saying. I'm not gonna appease you by trying to make it into something it's not. This is what I see. You're just like, okay. So
yeah.
How did this lead to writing the books?
Yeah. So when I started researching all this, 2015, right from when my dad went into hospice through when he passed, I just was like taking notes and everything. I was so shocked by all of this. Then I started just like journaling for myself, like in a private blog, just because every time I wrote about it, I got happy. I mean, I saw a lot of the humor in it. I would go to these medium readings and go to these medium workshops and like hide my identity and just, it was kind of ridiculous, some of the extent I went to. And it was kind of funny. So I was just blogging it, enjoying it. And then it just evolved. Like someone was like, well, you should actually blog about this. I was like, well, I will under a hidden identity because this is weird. And then it just went further and further and further. And I decided I was going to write the book. I pretty much had it done. And then I just, for a lot of reasons, it was over COVID. I started pulling away from writing it. My mentor in this world passed away, and I was really mad about that. I was like, I don't know. This might just be too weird. Then I kind of got, through a medium, a bit of a kick in the ass from her that I better go forward with it. And I was just like, I really have to. Like, my mentor friend Ginsburg, who passed away, like, you don't say no to that woman. Like, if anyone's listening who knows her, has met her, you know what I'm talking about. So I was like, I have to go forward. And then, the reception and about from my book, my podcast, like the more and more open I've been, it's so much better than I thought it was going to be. I thought there was going to be a lot of dismissal, a lot of thinking I'm nuts. And, it's just been kind of a huge relief, and it's been fun, and I really enjoy it. And I get like the podcast, I get to talk to people I just dream of talking to. The books, it's really been great sharing my story, and just readers will reach out to me, and I get in the best conversations, and it forms some friendships because it's not the most common interest in the world. So, they're people we kind of really connect with.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there is, I find there's two sides to it. So, or technically three. There's the cynics who will just dismiss it, and then there's kind of the spiritualism side of it. And then there's the science side of it. And I don't find often that the science and the spiritualism align. Some, there's kind of people in the middle, which is where I'd kind of describe myself. And then there's and what I mean is the science behind it has been going on for a few hundred years. There used to be, it's probably still around, there used to be a very famous institute from the 1800s. It is still around today in London, that investigates.
Society for Cyclical Research. It's international. Sadly, it closed in New York, but it's everywhere else. So.
Yes, and these trace back hundreds of years, or a few hundred years at least. But then you kind of get, and I'm gonna. This is gonna sound very clumsy, and I don't mean it to be. It's just an example, but. You'll kind of, and I say that because I have crystals in my office because I just like them, but you will kind of have the crystal healer who's called Purple, born under the radiant moon sort of thing, and you're like, okay, look, this is a bit too far out for me. Let's just ground ourselves here on planet Earth. Do you know what I mean? I think you did a few.
I agree completely.
I think you did a few too many disco biscuits back in the 90s, and but I do also. I like understanding people's experiences because they are individual, and the one thing that, like with yourself, that can be shared with a great deal of empathy is grief when we lose somebody, and just that I want some sort of knowledge or certainty that person is still okay, is still safe, is still present. It wasn't all meaningless. It wasn't for nothing. And people need things for different reasons. But grief grief is possibly one of the most traumatic experiences somebody can have. And
it really is.
There makes no sense to it, because the thing I find, I don't know how to describe it, but the thing with grief is we all know it's going to happen, but when it happens, it's nothing like we expected. But it's literally the one certainty we have in life. But we are so unprepared for that certainty, even with conversations with people, when it happens. And the thing that I find interesting about grief particularly is you can lose somebody that's close to you and it has little impact, and you can lose someone else that is close to you and it is devastating. And it's like there's no plausible scenario that explains it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've lost, like, my grandparents passed pretty much before I was born, one when I was very little. I find every loss that I've had of people close to me devastating, but I've lost some uncles, but unfortunately my extended family was never that close. So it was sad, but it wasn't devastating. But losing my dad and losing my mentor, Fran, just devastating. And losing animals has been devastating, but in a very different way. I find it's a different kind of grief, but devastating in a way our society doesn't understand. And, I still will get grief waves over them. So.
How do you explain what the books are about?
So the books, there's 2 of them. A third's in progress, probably won't be, maybe another year and a half. They tell my story. They start with what I opened with here in 2015, starting thinking there was zero chance of an afterlife and kind of taking a shot in the dark. And book 1 follows my story from, 2015, I guess, until like 2018, of the research, getting to meet the mediums, my first medium reading, questioning all of it. I got a few fake medium readings, including one intentionally, to compare. I go to like a seance, which was bullshit, and then so it's a combination of my researching where I'm coming across some bullshit and some genuine stuff that's absolutely transforming my mind. And it's how I meet my mentors. Fran and Bob Ginsberg, the founders of Forever Family Foundation, which has a scientific protocols to certify psychic mediums to assure they're not cheating. And then they have a board of the scientific advisory board, and they have brief retreats. And the founders became like my parents, and it's how I met them. And then book 2 picks up where book 1 left off, which I guess it starts in 2018. And it's about how I'm continuing the research and my friendships are deepening. And, it's kind of just follows the same trajectory. And it goes into, I guess, about 2021. And then the third book will be 2021 through today.
Is there anything that you learned that was unexpected?
Oh, like 100% of it. Every single thing. That's all it was. Just bit by bit, all the ways. Really, I'll start answering that by saying, I think the question most people think about asking when is there an afterlife, is there a God in heaven, or is it atheism? And I still consider myself an atheist, but I think that's the wrong question. I think the question is consciousness created by a brain, or is it created in some type of, the best word we have today with our understanding of science, quantum particle wave form that downloads and entangles with our brain? And so all the evidence, all the reasons that show that our consciousness is non-physical, that there's a logical reason and explanation for an afterlife and survival, continuation of consciousness, which I prefer over afterlife, because afterlife implies here and then there, and only 2 states of consciousness. Just all of it and all the forms that takes, from out of body experiences to psychic mediums to the difference between psychic and medium to remote viewing. Just every single minute of this was shocking in a good way. So
I have a similar question from a spiritual point of view, which is how I started the premise of writing my book. And it was the question I asked myself is, if it's three types of people, if you want. One is an atheist, i.e. we die, nothing happens. You're born, you're dead, that's the end. The second one is some form of religious belief, in which case I can pencil that down to whatever country or culture you were raised in is why you have that belief. There are over 3,000 deities, so if you believe in any form of religion associated afterlife, it's most likely going to be connected to who your parents are and how you were raised in 99% of the time. If you're not particularly religious, or you're religious but don't believe that's the explanation, but you do believe that we are consciousness that enters a body, or we do this, I come up with the question that the real question should be, why? Because the fact that we are suggesting we come from somewhere and then later go somewhere. So my question to myself is, why did we do this? What purpose would it? And, I sort of kind of tried to answer it my own way in the book, but that's where the premise of the book started from, is why? Why would you do this? What was its purpose? And, and that's the question I always ask myself.
Yeah, I mean, oof. Well, one thing I am just going to adjust, then I'll answer this, is I actually still consider myself an atheist, because I think atheist just means you don't believe in a God, but you think there's. So I actually call myself an atheist, and but even though I think there most likely is an afterlife or survival of consciousness. And now why? Oof, that is the question. I'm going to have to kind of mainly quote other people, because if I quote myself, I have no idea. I don't know.
You and I are probably sitting at the same table, to be fair. I come up with the question. I'm not sure I came up with a good answer.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a purpose. It could just be, just totally meaningless.
Yeah, it could just be shits and giggles.
Yeah, it could have just happened. It could have just formed this way for absolutely no logical reason. Some mediums will say it's to learn love and to grow, and it's like a school here. Maybe. Maybe that's part of it. That seems a little bit simplistic, but it's also a lot of people who are very smart are saying that. It could be like almost, I sometimes have wondered this, and totally philosophically, again, I absolutely would not say it's this more than it's absolutely meaningless and just happens to be. But, kind of like a filter, like filtering and healing and cleaning dark energies. And the reason I think that maybe is because there's a lot of horrible people here who do a lot of horrible things. And when you really get down to it, most of them have been really hurt. And our instincts as people are to fight back. I mean, that's certainly my instinct. But if you find sort of the highest level of people, or you look at something beautiful like prison reform, most of those people who are just done the most horrible things, when they start healing, they see they were just hurt themselves. And then they go on to do good themselves and don't hurt others anymore. So there's something about that. Like if we were to respond early on to people who behave horribly with love, like starting in childhood, everything would change. So that's very, very, very philosophical, absolutely not evidence-based. It's just one of those thoughts I have. So,
I think I don't disagree, but there's elements, because there's people that grow up in really loving backgrounds and have the most amazing lives, can do the most atrocious things. There is something about human nature. Well, we say human nature, but if you look at any nature accounts and look what animals will do to each other in the name of survival, in the name of, I like I said, I like your suggestion. I like that as some form of filtering, some form of cleaning out. But there's an element of me as well that is like, if you go back just say 10,000 years, because there's about 10,000 generations of farming, and farming is when we kind of took those first steps where we stopped being nomadic. We were no different to any other animal wandering around the savannah and the fields. There was nothing that separated us. The leaps in our evolution came when we started farming and we become stationary and actually stepped out of the natural, for want of a better term, the natural world. Now, why are we the only ones that did that? Maybe that's this higher consciousness thing. Maybe, because you mentioned that thing about time at the very beginning. I remember a meditation, and it was a curse and a blessing. This meditation, and the reason I call it a curse and a blessing is because I've chased it ever since for the last 20 years. But I had this meditation that kind of became like an out-of-body experience. And the only way I can describe it is I was sitting on top of a mountain. But that mountain could see the entire universe. So when I looked across the sky, I could see across space in all directions, regardless of where my eyes were pointing. And I knew everything that had ever happened and everything that ever will happen. And it happened in that moment. Now, I don't know if I was in that place for a second or 20 minutes. I don't. All I can say is for the first time in my life, I understood something which I've never been able to answer since. And there is no way that I could take what I understood and explain it to anybody. And the reason I say it was a blessing, because it opened me up to something that I would never else have experienced. The curse is I've always felt since that I don't belong here, and it hurts every day. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just like, and I can't go back there. But there was a real understanding that there's a limitation to this format that we present ourselves in, which I think kind of like answers that problem of why do we do this? You couldn't understand it anyway because it's not the format that you would normally live in, if that or exist in, or consciousness or coexist, however it is when we're not here. And it's just like it's almost like this is as basic as it gets as a vibration or a frequency or a consciousness, and there's no way you could understand the perception of what we actually are, which sounds like a very complicated rant. Yeah, I'm not sure where that come from.
That's what near-death experiencers share too. A lot of what you said. So, different experiences. Some describe something similar to the edge of the universe. Some seeing deceased loved ones, but the after effect of not being able to explain it and feeling like you don't belong, that's near-death experiencers all say that.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So what's next? What's next for you with the book?
What's next? So I'm finishing the audiobook for my second book. Audiobooks take so much time. Wow. So I'm finishing that. And then I'm working on my third book. It's just, I'm sort of start writing it in the sense that after I have experiences, I write them all in notes, and then I'm going to put it together and publish a third one. Probably, I haven't started writing it yet. I have to finish the second audiobook. That's where I'm at. And just kind of a question just popped into my head because we were talking about grief and stuff. Have you found any comfort in your research? Oh my God, yes. I mean, just remarkable comfort. Joy when I didn't think I could feel it in my darkest days. And it gives me comfort always. Just knowing, I don't want to use that word. I'm going to correct myself. Thinking it's most probable that there's other dimensions and so much more than this, and afterlife, and this isn't it. All of that.
I understand, because I use the word faith, and the reason I say that, because faith is beyond, it's not hope. Faith is something I believe that I cannot prove to you, but it's enough for me that I believe it. Okay.
Yeah, for me, I'm there's evidence. So I say
Yeah.
it doesn't resonate with me personally. For me, it's a preponderance of evidence that consciousness survives bodily death. And I'd say it goes even beyond that, that our consciousness operates in a way we don't understand that seems to be non-physical. And whether it continues, I think that's, beyond a reasonable doubt, actually, which is stronger than preponderance of evidence. But, what does that mean in years? What does that mean? What does that look like? Does it go on for another 1,000 years, or is it eternal? Who knows?
I remember, do you know the physicist Brian Cox, who...
Yeah.
So I remember him talking about somebody asking about God. And I'm paraphrasing slightly, so but he effectively said that he is interested in the components of the universe. He said, however, the evidence that something doesn't exist isn't evidence that it doesn't exist. He said you have to be able to, if you can't prove it's not there, you still have to be able to prove it doesn't exist. He says.
Wait, I'm writing that quote down. I don't think I heard it.
I'll try and find the exact. I'll try and find the exact clip, and because he explains it much better than me. But he's just like, just because you can't prove something exists, you still have to prove it can't exist.
Okay. Well, I'll Google this too because I want to share that on social. That's an amazing quote.
Yeah,
too.
I'll try and find it for you, and I'll email it to you. And he then and he then sort of said, I don't need, what I understand about the universe is enough for me, and that's why he kind of doesn't seek God. And I just, the way he explained it so elegantly, I just loved. And something else that popped into my head as we were talking is, do you ever find, I'm trying to think, that at times you feel connected to something and other times you don't?
Yes, very much. And at times I feel connected to different things. Like sometimes it'll be my dad or my mentor Fran or something bigger than me, or I hate using the word higher self because it has so much woo connotation, but I don't have a better word.
I have the same dilemma, do you know what I mean? Because I wrote a book on reincarnation about 10 years ago. So if some people hear that, they're like, oh, they can't. It's like, no, I'm not like that woo-woo guy. I'm not. Do you know
right.
Do you know what I mean? And they're suddenly like, oh, well, what are you then? And it's just somebody explored a question from my own experiences. And I wrote a book on why I believe that reincarnation could be a thing. And like you say, but there is this kind of, like I was saying that earlier on, the whole, it gets a bit too woo-woo, and we're all like angel children, and it's just like, no. I appreciate it, but it's not the platform that I sit on,
Same.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah. And it's kind of funny sometimes, all the language I feel people who want to sound logical try to come up with to explain this to avoid the words. It's like discarnate for deceased ones. I mean, you could, previous personalities that, they use for, what's the word? Not instead of cases, instead of reincarnation, like Ian Stevenson would say, cases of previous personalities. Just everything to avoid that. I mean, I think you can kind of get humorous, and laugh about it, but also in my deep grief, it made all the difference in the world to me to hear these grounded phrases.
Yeah.
Like discarnate for deceased loved ones, so.
No, it does. It all helps. And ultimately, when you're doing research, some of the things that you could easily dismiss could become the lessons that join the cogs together, that help you, build the machinery that makes the picture. It's too easy to dismiss something sometimes, and instead of trying to listen beyond the word, the phrase, because like you say, we communicate differently. Like what you would kind of describe as your belief from evidence is similar to the reason I call it faith. It's just probably because I was raised as a Catholic. Faith is a strong proponent as a word for me. Because it's basically, I can't actually put it in front of you as like I can hold up this pen and say, look, that's evidence that this pen exists because it's in my hand. Do you know what I mean? The same as you can't say, well, look, here's this consciousness, I'll pull it out of the sky and show it to you. So, but it's like they say, it's the meanings of things that resonate for us. And I like yourself, I like to have conversations with everybody. But I do have to sort of like, okay, just calm down on that side a little bit. You know, the rainbow colours and the vibrations and the frequencies, and we all agree. We just have different ways of describing it, and you know. But lastly, and this is an irrelevant question, I just like to ask it at the end of all my podcasts.
Sure.
Interestingly, we did speak about time at the beginning, time machines. So I want you to imagine you have a time machine. The time machine is a car. What car would you choose? Where would you go? And what would be playing on the radio?
Oof. Okay. Well, I'm going to make up a car a little.
Yeah.
A Waymo. I don't know if that's the kind of car, but I'm obsessed with Waymo now, those self-driving cars. Yeah. And I'd probably prefer technology to drive it if it's taking me time travel. I trust that more than I would a human. But a Waymo convertible, because that would be... Actually, I'm taking that back. Moving at that speed in a convertible, too scary. So I'm taking back moving like faster than the speed of light in a convertible. Never mind. So a Waymo. Where would it take me? Ooh. Oh my God. Can you go future or past?
It's entirely your idea.
Oh, I mean, of course, there's the like go back in the past and like invest in Bitcoin, spend more time with my dad, sure. But honestly, I think I would go like a million years in the future and just explore. I'd be too curious. Now that I think I'm going to see my dad again anyway.
Well, why not go back? Why not go back, pick him up, and jump into the future?
Oh, I can do both? I thought I had to pick one thing. Okay.
Oh, Christ. It's a random question. I'm not going to put rules on it.
Okay, so I'll go get my dad, I'll get my mentor, Fran, and we'll go like maybe even 10 million years in the future and just see what's happening. And
what will be on the radio?
What would be... Oh, God. I love music, and I'm so bad at like knowing like my mind blanks, and I'm going to say something cheesy like Taylor Swift, who I love, but I feel like I should be more interesting than that. Oh, I got it. Whatever band is the most popular in a million years.
And we'll stop it there. But Taylor Swift is fine. We can be okay with Taylor Swift.
I love Taylor Swift, but like I feel like it could be more interesting than that. That's very like everybody basic, but
I think Taylor Swift is one of those random things where people can love music but hate her music, which I find weird. Do you know what I mean?
I love her music, yeah. But I'm not a music snob. I'm not like sophisticated about music. Like I love music. I get so much like sensorial joy from it. I use it for like some types of meditations. I'm really happy listening to, but like I'm not, so I don't have like a sophisticated ear palette is the word. Like I can love sophisticated music. I can love really cheesy music, and
I'm the same. One minute I'm dancing to cheesy 80s pop, the next minute I'm listening to some really kind of melancholy sort of like Moonlight Sonata or something. And to be perfectly frank, if Taylor Swift was aiming her music at the likes of me, she wouldn't be successsul. So do you know what I mean? I'm like you.
Don't love her music?
No. But what I mean is, it's just my taste in music is the same. Do you know what I mean? I'm like you. I can listen to everything and anything. I'm not sophisticated in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And if I had a record collection, it would just be greatest hits of things, because I'm just not subtle like that. Like you say, there's some people that can really appreciate songs and stuff like that, and no, that's just not me.
Yeah. I have that with visual, and I have it with like writing, but otherwise like visual I'm very have very strong opinions, very details, but music I just enjoy it.
I'm the same, because I like to journal, but I can also literally contemplate a flower and look at it for an hour. But I don't have that depth for music. Anyway, that is perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh my God, thank you. I had such a great time speaking with you. You asked great questions and lots of fun.
You're welcome. I always find it interesting what can lead us down a path, and sadly for Liz, losing her father was the catalyst and has led her down this journey, this road, to explore something. And I think it's really helpful that you have people like Liz who are from the science side, the logic side, because when we're caught up in moments of grief, there is something about hope, something about beyond us, outside of us, that can be of huge benefit in the healing process, whilst also opening our mind to something different, a greater understanding of how the world operates, the universe operates. And for some people it doesn't matter, but if you're that person searching for something, then the only thing that will satisfy that pain, that vacuum, is people searching who might have questions or answers for you. And so if you do have your own questions, or there are answers you want to share, please do check out Liz. In the website will be in the description. And as always, wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.